works, is there any chance they could keep Bryce and all those outfielders since Zim only has 1 year left and he plays first? Is there a chance of that?
I think there's a realistic chance that you consider moving Soto to first, or I guess Bryce too. I haven't heard them say it about Bryce. I've heard them say that they'd be willing to think about Soto there just because the numbers play, right? You never want to move the numbers, don't plus player, but
Right,
either Soto or Bryce, stand up at first base. So it's something you could consider. And I know they've at least sort of not ruled it out with Soto. So yeah, I wouldn't rule out anything. I don't think signing Bryce locks them in the outfield in any way. He hasn't been good enough defensively, but
and just for longevity for his career, I would think that first is a better suit for for the next 10 years than it is in the outfield.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how open he is to that at this point. But yeah, especially if he ends up coming back to DC, I think those possibilities really start coming into play. I don't see why he'd sign somewhere else where, he couldn't play where he wanted to play.
All right, but let me ask you. You act like you're Mike Rizzo here, right? You're the general manager. You've got the financial restraints of the learners, and it's going to take several $100 million, probably in all likelihood, to bring Bryce back. But then you also have pitching help you need, the bullpen. There are quite a few needs. How would you go about it? What would you do?
It's a great question. I personally think that I take, Adam Eaton, Juan Soto, Victor Robles, Michael Taylor, and say some combination of you is playing the outfield next year. If Robles can't hit, you give Taylor a shot to play good defense. And if you're in it at the deadline, you can add. That gives you a $13 million outfield. And then I try to go sign Rendon and Turner long-term. And that's where I put the Bryce money. That also gives you a lot of money to go get a couple free agent starters and whatever else you need.
Right.
The backup plan is to sign Bryce and then trade Robles for Real Muto or one of the big starters that is not, a free agent. So I think there's two scenarios. But for me, I think the most cost-effective and, prop the window open option is to just go with the young outfield, sign Turner, sign Rendon, and say, this is our core moving forward.
And because your second option, you didn't address the starters.
Right. The second option makes it hard because then all of a sudden you've got to find people on the trade market, and there's not a great trade market. I've been looking at it for a while, and, I think you'd have to have Rizzo pull off a Gio deal where he hits on someone who is sort of on the rise and not on the radar. I know he was kind of on the radar, but he really kind of established himself in DC. So you'd have to, do a 4-for-1 kind of deal. You'd be taking a risk. There's no obvious candidates that you'd actually have a realistic chance at. So, I think if you're really trying to give yourself the best roster guarantee, you can go with the cheap outfield and then spend on pitching. But they've got a lot of work to do. So to lock it all up into Bryce would make things harder for them.
Yeah. Well, the alternative theory, and this is one that Cakes pitches, is you're the learners. You're worth billions and billions of dollars.
Just sign them all.
Pay for them all.
That's my approach, Chelsea. I don't care about the money. If I'm a
that might be the most likely scenario.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the most likely that would happen.
So what is it going to be? What is it going to be like for you as a beat reporter who covers them every single day? Not only today, but the final game in Colorado. Is it going to be weird? Are you going to say, Bryce, it was nice, knowing you, covering you, or are you just going to kind of just let it go?
It'll definitely be weird. That guy, for better or worse, has taken up a lot of, my time in life for the last 4 years, and is still a remarkable talent. The home run derby was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And he's always been, pretty good to all of us. It's been kind of a weird year for him, not wanting to, talk about next year. But he's just a really complicated figure here, I think, which is kind of crazy.
Do you like him?
I think, yeah, I do. I think there are times where he gets really caught up in the game and in, all the stresses of being Bryce Harper, but I can't relate to those. So, on good Bryce Harper days, I think he's a really nice guy and does a lot of stuff we don't see for people who need help and things like that. So, right. I definitely think he gets a bad rep because he's a pretty emotional guy, but by the same token, he's a really emotional guy, which should also inform people as they think about where he might want to go, that if he's decided, man, I didn't know what I had here, maybe all of a sudden he sort of changes his tune. But it'll be weird because he's the staple. He's the guy you always have to worry about and can never write about too much. And, this is something we've kind of waited for years now. And it's like, oh, wow, this is that free agency thing we've all been talking about for what seems like my whole life.
Do you think at the end of the day, last question for you, do you think he'd continue to stay here, any type of home? Because I heard somebody from the Nats say he'll take wherever he gets 1 penny more.
I don't think he's chasing only the money. I think this year might have changed that. So I would say there is a chance he structures his deal in a favorable way for the Nationals. I don't think the deal will be remarkably lower. I don't see him doing that, but I think there's a growing chance that he, would make things easier on them if Scott Boras lets him.